Welcome to Crimson Guitars, welcome to Patrons Questions, episode 29. Today I've got questions about filling inaccurate fret slots. For shame. And what? Oh wait, it's two questions in one, you greedy person. Where should I get wood suitable for a laminated 3-neck without paying tonewood prices? And finally, another question here about what? Oh, choking. Stroking. No, I've now completely lost it. My brain is going off. Strings, bending, choking out. Change the subject. Okay, so this is two questions in one from Andrew Bimpson. Bimson, he says, Bimson, you should come work here, he rhymes. I have, at the vintage tool shop, I don't know how, but I've ended up with 5 employees. One of them is called Carol, which is fine. The rest are John, James, Jake, and Jake. There's so many J's, I can't even remember them all now. Damn it! John, James, Jake, sure there's a fourth one. I need more coffee now. Jack! There we go. I knew it. John, James, Jack and Jake. And Carol. Her middle name must begin with a J. I don't know. Okay, so Andrew Bimson, he says, I'm so sorry for that. The only question I have pertinent to my current project is how to fix inaccurate fret slots. I'm assuming it's sawdust and super glue, but any tips welcome. And then he's got another question, Owen, for the next one. Where to get wood suitable for laminated through neck without paying tonewood prices? Okay, so how to fix inaccurate fret slots. Okay, super glue, dust and super glue has its place. And I have done exactly that. I've messed up on fret slots before, like months and months ago. It happens, not recently, thankfully. And if it's only slightly out, I will fill with dust and super glue, or if it's just a small portion of the fret, so most of it's straight, and then you've wiggled with the saw a little bit, then dust and super glue does do the job properly. The issue is you have a slot in there already, and you're filling it with dissimilar material to what is in the rest of the slot. When you then come to recut afterwards, the saw wants to go into the original slot. So you need to be much more careful when you're cutting the second time around, because it just wants to be guided back into the original slot. Now, what I've done in the past that I prefer is to fill the entire fret slot with a veneer that at least has a grain somewhat more similar to the fretboard. And if I was being even more pedantic, I would, instead of putting the veneer with the grain horizontal to the fretboard grain, I would try and cut an end grain veneer, which is practically impossible, or an end grain wedge, and then put that in, or even build up. No, that's it. So, Coffee Ben. What I'm trying to say, this piece of paper has grain going along the length of the A4. Instead of putting it into the fret slot like that, put it into the fret slot like that, dink, and then you've got the end grain, and the grain feels and cuts much closer to the fretboard itself, and hopefully you'll have a much easier time cutting the second time around. Other than that, cut carefully. You can use a guide, so put a block down on the top of the fretboard square, even if you want to cut a radius into that and clamp it down and use that as a guide. I don't normally need that. I don't need that when I'm cutting slots the first time round, but if you've got something in there that's trying to guide your saw away, then use any tool that you possibly can, to be frank. So yeah, take the scalpel blade, score a mark on there exactly where the fret needs to be, then go with a saw, and just take it slow and careful. Make sure you've got a sharp saw. Okay, where to get wood suitable for laminated through next without paying tonewood prices. Tonewood prices tend to be because somebody has gone to the trouble of properly drying and checking and looking after the wood before it gets to your workshop. Okay, now running a kiln, for example, is incredibly expensive. It's a huge drain on electricity and space. They're big things, etc. It's difficult. There is a lot of time involved in cutting wood down to the right size so that it dries relatively quickly, but not too quickly. You've got to turn things over, you've got to sticker them up, you've got to paint the ends of it. So for one, I need to say tonewood prices are not necessarily a crock of dink. They sometimes are, but not necessarily. There is work involved. That being said, you're a small luthier, you want to fund your hobby as inexpensively as possible, so which is totally understandable. Hell, we're a big luthier and we do the exact same thing, otherwise we wouldn't be here. Now we do it by drying our own wood in-house and then charging luthier prices when we sell it. That's what that tin is. This little gold tin has been sitting there being a squirrel on my bench. Hampshire Sheen gold embellishing paste wax. They're thinking about developing something like that, and I didn't know what it was. So we dried ourselves, and we have the time and staff to do that sort of thing. We have the machines to cut it down. We have it's here, and I'm very, very, very incredibly lucky I can do that. If you can afford to wait 6 months to a year, do that. Go to somebody who, well, a year or more if you can get it from a local sawyer, somebody who's got I've just forgotten the brand name. Wood miser. There we go. Somebody's got a wood miser, and I want cherry. Okay, fine. You're in the States. There's cherry about the place. You will be able to find somebody who will sell you for half the price or a quarter of the price wet wood that's just been cut. Now the tree might have been sitting in his yard for a couple of years, slowly drying to air dry. Once he cuts it, any tensions that are in there are going to move, and you're going to get planks that are twisted and moved to a certain extent. And it then needs to be dried even further. And then when you cut that large 4-inch blank down into 1-inch slots, you're going to release any more tension that's in there. And it needs to be done slowly and carefully. That being said, there are bargains about there. There are definitely bargains about. There are many, many, many wood supply houses who sell wood to the furniture industry that is as dry or more dry than a luthier will need, and there isn't that tone wood hype or upcharge as it is. So all I can say is look around. Bell Forest is one company I know in the States. Good wood, ship all over the place. But you also need to consider how much is your money worth. Okay, so you want to buy one guitar's worth of multi-laminate necks in, say, maple and wenge. All right, you'll maybe spend 40 quid or 50 quid on the wood if you buy it dry and good to go. You're not going to save more than 10 or 15 quid by getting, well, you'll never find wet wenge, I suppose. Do the sums. Okay, in all seriousness, for us, we're buying a quarter of a tree and then chopping it up and drying it, and we end up a year later with 50 guitars worth of poplar tops, for example, or 150 guitar neck blanks, and that's worth the time for us because the wood is costing us a quarter of what it would because we're buying in that bulk, and then we're doing a lot of work. The wage costs to the apprentices, the electricity cost for the dehumidifier running 24/7, all of that does add to the price. So is your time, and is it worth you waiting that long as opposed to spending a couple of pints of beer worth of more money? You shouldn't be drinking anyway. You want to be building guitars. This is an all-consuming habit. You're not allowed a social life, as it says on the back of the t-shirts. Often I would say, and I'm not saying come and buy it from us because we don't do very much wood, but often it is actually just easier and better just to pay a slightly higher price to get stuff that you know is perfectly right. That's kind of where I'm leading with this. Okay, so the final part of the question is, this is from Jeff Proul. He says, I've just finished building a guitar, really happy with the results. Finish and frets look good, thanks to Crimson Tools. The fretboard is, I think, flat and the frets are leveled, measured with a rocker. However, I cannot bend the first string. I'm going to assume this is the thin E, the high E, the 9 gauge. There we go, let's say that. Or the 10 gauge, because he's a fan of ours and he knows that 9 is for... Ooh, I can't believe I still have that narrow-minded misconception there. Play with whatever gauge strings you fancy. Yeah, ZZ Top can do it, then you bloody can. 8 gauge. 8 gauge. We built a guitar with 8 gauge strings once, and no one in the building could play it. Oh. Anyway, I cannot bend the first string. It chokes out almost immediately. I can bend the second string towards the first string without issues. I know these questions are hard to answer without seeing the guitar, but do you have any suggestions on how to fix this? I was thinking about adding runoff on that side to lower the high frets, but thought I'd ask before creating issues. Okay, Alex Perkins has answered this with a, well, I'm just going to read that for you. He says, check your neck relief and string action. You might have too much relief and stroke or low string action. Make sure the neck is as straight as possible without notes close to the nut buzzing, and then adjust your string action to about 4/64 of an inch. What the frick is 4/64 of an inch? Low. At the 12th fret. You can also sight down the neck to check for any twists or humps, because that will cause that issue as well. Absolutely valid. And, well, I mean, basically that. Check for twists, checks for lumps and bumps. If you have the fret rocker checks from string to string, or from fret to fret. It's 3 frets worth of checking. You could quite conceivably have a fairly huge twist in it and not even notice that without by using the fret rocker. If your action is wrong at the nut, it will cause buzzing out on the strings. I would check the nut first. If you don't have a notched straight edge, get a notched straight edge. Make sure it's either one of ours or one that's straight. Seriously, with notched straight edges, spend the money, because the cheap ones just are not good enough. This is turning into selling stuff. I'm not meant to. I don't want to. I do want to, but that's not the point. My spirit animal. Notched straight edge. See what's happening along the entire neck, for one. The nut slot itself might need work. It might be too low. It might be too high, actually. But what it also sounds to me like might have happened is your radius is nice and even for most of the frets, but at the edge of the board it goes further down, and with a tighter radius, when you try and bend a string at least, that will cause buzzing and choking out. So check that out. But essentially it is a geometry issue. Write down notes and then check everything. String height, radius, nut slot height, bridge height for that string, etc, etc, etc. See where the buzzing disappears when you're adjusting the bridge, the saddle height up, etc. This, well, as you said, it's very, very, very difficult to diagnose without a guitar in front of you. But there are only so many things that it can be. And your suggestion at the end was I was thinking about adding runoff on that side to lower the high frets. I mean, it just sounds to me like that might well be one of the things that you just need to do. Check the geometry, use straight edges, and go from there. Okay, thank you for watching. Thank you for being phenomenal people with incredible good taste and even better looks. And I will see you next week. Be good. Go make some sawdust. Yeah. With the side benefit of a guitar sort of arriving in the process as well. See you later.